started as a spontaneous adventure, a late-night road trip across a desolate highway surrounded by endless forests. 5 friends, excited for an adrenaline-fueled journey, packed their car with snacks, a playlist of old classics, and a shared sense of adventure. However, none of them anticipated the nightmare that awaited them. It was 10 p.m. when the group, led by Sam, the designated driver, hit the highway. His girlfriend, Clara, sat in the passenger seat, flipping through radio channels. The back seat was filled with their friends: Ethan, a skeptic; Lisa, the cautious one; and Max, the prankster. The plan was to drive through the abandoned Route 66 stretch and stop at a famous lookout point, rumored to be haunted. Despite Lisa's protests, the group decided it would make for a thrilling story. An hour into the trip, the car's headlights caught a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman in a tattered white dress, her face obscured by her long, dark hair. Sam slammed on the brakes, and the car screeched to a halt just inches away from her. Before they could react, the woman disappeared into the darkness. "What the hell was that?" Lisa whispered, her voice shaking. "Probably some crazy hitchhiker," Ethan said dismissively. "Let's keep moving." But as they drove away, Clara noticed something in the rearview mirror, a faint shadow following their car, keeping pace. Running low on gas, the group pulled into an old, seemingly deserted gas station. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Max joked about it being the perfect setting for a horror movie, but the tension was palpable. Inside the station, they found a lone attendant, an old man with cloudy eyes who seemed oblivious to their presence. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered as he filled the tank. "What do you mean?" Sam asked nervously. "The road. It doesn't end well for travelers. Turn back while you can," the man warned before retreating into the shadows of the station. Ignoring the old man's warning, the group continued their journey. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, the forest on either side growing denser. The GPS began malfunctioning, showing them driving in circles despite heading straight. Then came the noises, whispers that seemed to originate from the trees, growing louder with each passing mile. Clara swore she saw glowing eyes staring at them from the woods, but the others dismissed it as paranoia. Suddenly the car's engine sputtered and died. They were stranded in the middle of nowhere. As the group debated their next move, they noticed a faint light in the distance. Hoping for help, they ventured into the forest and stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin. The door creaked open as if inviting them in. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and a dusty table in the center held a faded photograph of the woman they had seen earlier on the road. "What is this place?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the door slammed shut, and the whispers from the forest grew louder, now coming from within the cabin. The group tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. Max, in a panic, attempted to open a window but froze as a pair of skeletal hands reached out and grabbed him. He screamed, and the group pulled him back, only to find deep claw marks on his arm. Lights flickered inside the cabin, revealing shadowy figures moving toward them. Lisa spotted a journal on the table and frantically flipped through its pages. It detailed the tragic story of a family who had lived there and mysteriously disappeared, their spirits cursed to haunt the road and anyone who dared cross it. "We need to finish the ritual to break the curse," Lisa yelled, pointing to a set of instructions in the journal. Following the journal, the group worked together to complete the ritual, lighting candles and chanting the words written on the pages. The shadowy figures grew more aggressive, clawing at them and whispering their names. In a final desperate act, Sam lit the last candle. A deafening scream filled the cabin, and the shadows dissipated. The door flew open, and the group ran back to their car, which miraculously started again. They drove in silence, the weight of their ordeal settling in. When they reached civilization, they reported the cabin to the authorities, but no trace of it was ever found. Years later, each of them still wakes up in the middle of the night, haunted by the whispers and shadows of that fateful road trip. Some roads, Ethan would later say, are meant to stay forgotten. Weeks had passed since the horrifying ordeal on the cursed road. The 5 friends tried to return to their normal lives, but the experience had left deep scars. The shadows they encountered weren't just confined to that cabin. They had followed them back, lingering at the edges of their consciousness. Clara was the first to notice something was wrong. She began having vivid nightmares of the woman in the white dress. Each time, the dream ended the same way. The woman standing at the foot of her bed, whispering incomprehensible words. Ethan, the skeptic of the group, dismissed it as residual fear, but soon he too began experiencing strange occurrences. Objects in his apartment moved on their own, lights flickered, and he often felt as though someone was watching him. "I think the curse didn't end that night," Lisa whispered during a group call. Her voice trembled with fear. "We broke something, but it wasn't the curse. It was a seal, and now it's out." One day, Sam woke up to find the same strange symbol they had seen on the cabin walls scratched into the hood of his car. Clara discovered the same symbol etched into her bathroom mirror, as though drawn with a finger in steam. "What does it mean?" Max asked during an impromptu meeting at Lisa's house. "It's a mark," Lisa explained, spreading out old books she had borrowed from a local historian. "It means we're still bound to whatever haunts that road, and if we don't find a way to stop it, it's going to consume us." The group decided to visit the local historian Lisa had mentioned. Mr. Radcliffe, a frail man with piercing blue eyes, listened intently as they recounted their experience. "You should have stayed away from that road," he said gravely. "It's not just cursed, it's a gateway. That family didn't just disappear. They became part of the road, bound to it for eternity. And now, so are you." He handed them a map, marked with locations tied to the curse. "There's an altar deep in the forest. You'll need to go there and seal the gateway permanently. But be warned, whatever lives on that road won't let you go easily." Reluctantly, the friends decided to return to the cursed road. Armed with salt, candles, and the incantations from Radcliffe, they set out at dusk. The tension in the car was palpable. "This is insane," Max muttered, gripping a baseball bat. "We barely made it out alive last time." "We don't have a choice," Clara said firmly. "This thing is destroying our lives." As they reached the desolate highway, the familiar unease returned. The trees seemed taller, the shadows darker, and the whispers louder. Guided by the map, they ventured into the forest. The deeper they went, the more surreal the landscape became. The trees twisted unnaturally, and the air grew colder with every step. They finally found the altar, a massive stone slab covered in the same symbols they had seen before. Surrounding it were remnants of the family's belongings, toys, photographs, and a blood-stained journal. Before they could begin the ritual, the shadows emerged again, this time more corporeal. They took on the forms of the family members, their faces frozen in expressions of anguish. The group hurriedly lit the candles and began chanting the incantation. The shadows screamed, their voices blending into a deafening cacophony. "Don't stop!" Lisa yelled as the shadows lunged at them. Max swung his bat, but it passed through the figures, leaving him defenseless. Sam poured salt around the altar, forming a protective circle. The shadows grew more aggressive, clawing at the invisible barrier. As Clara recited the final words, the altar began to glow. The ground shook violently, and a blinding light engulfed the area. When the light faded, the shadows were gone, and the forest was eerily quiet. The group staggered back to the car, exhausted but relieved. "Do you think it's over?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. "I hope so," Clara replied, though her tone was uncertain. Back in town, things seemed normal at first. The scratches and symbols disappeared and the nightmares ceased. But weeks later, Clara found an old photograph tucked into her backpack. It was of the woman in white, her face now visible. She was smiling. The group soon realized that while the gateway had been sealed, the curse had not been lifted. The road hadn't forgotten them. It was only biding its time. Months passed and the friends tried to return to their lives, but the sense of dread never truly left them. It started with small things, faint whispers in the dead of night, fleeting shadows in mirrors, and strange chills in otherwise warm rooms. They ignored these signs, desperate to believe the nightmare was over. But the road wasn't done with them. One evening, Sam noticed the symbol etched into his bedroom ceiling. It wasn't there when he moved in, and the discovery sent a shiver down his spine. He called Clara, who revealed she had been having strange dreams again, dreams of the woman in white standing at the end of a long, endless road. "I think it's starting again," Clara whispered. The others began reporting similar experiences. Ethan's dog barked relentlessly at nothing in the middle of the night. Lisa's car radio played eerie static even when it was turned off. Max woke up with claw-like scratches on his back that he couldn't explain. The group gathered at Lisa's house to discuss their next move. "We sealed the gateway, but it's still coming after us," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "Radcliffe warned us, remember? The curse isn't just on the road, it's on us now." "Then how do we stop it?" Ethan demanded. "We go back," Clara said firmly. "We need to find out what it wants." As they prepared for their return to the cursed road, Clara studied the photograph of the woman in white, the one she had found in her backpack after the ritual. There was something unsettling about her face, a mix of sorrow and malevolence. Lisa dug deeper into the family's history and uncovered a chilling revelation. The woman was the matriarch of the cursed family. Her name was Eleanor Blackwood, and she had been accused of witchcraft in the late 1800s. According to local legends, she performed a forbidden ritual to protect her family from a deadly plague, but it backfired, trapping their souls in the forest forever. "We didn't just seal a gateway," Lisa explained. "We locked them in their torment again. Eleanor must blame us for that." Determined to end the curse for good, the group returned to the abandoned stretch of Route 66. The drive was unnervingly quiet, as though the forest was waiting for them. When they reached the spot where their car had broken down months ago, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, and the trees seemed to lean closer, their gnarled branches reaching like claws. Eleanor was waiting. She appeared in the middle of the road, her tattered dress billowing in an unseen wind. This time her face was fully visible, pale, gaunt, and twisted with rage. Her hollow eyes seemed to pierce their souls. "Why have you come back?" Eleanor's voice was a chilling echo that seemed to come from all directions. "We want to end this," Clara said, stepping forward despite her trembling hands. "What do you want from us?" Eleanor pointed at the group. "You disturbed the balance. You locked us in suffering. Now you will pay the price." The shadows emerged again, encircling the group. But this time they were more powerful, more solid. They grabbed at the friends, dragging them toward the forest. "Wait!" Lisa shouted, clutching the photograph. "We can help you. We know what happened to you and your family. We know about the ritual." Eleanor hesitated, her rage momentarily replaced by sorrow. "It was meant to save us," she whispered. "But it bound us here instead. I only wanted to protect my children." "We can break the curse," Lisa pleaded, "but you have to let us try." Eleanor nodded reluctantly, and the shadows released the group. Eleanor led them deeper into the forest, to a hidden altar they hadn't seen before. It was covered in ancient symbols and surrounded by the remains of Eleanor's family, bones, toys, and scraps of clothing. Lisa opened Radcliffe's journal, which included details about a reversal ritual. It required Eleanor's cooperation and the sacrifice of something precious to her. Eleanor placed a locket, a memento of her children, on the altar. "Do it," she said, her voice breaking. The group performed the ritual, chanting the ancient words as the forest trembled around them. A brilliant light engulfed the altar and Eleanor's figure began to dissolve. "Thank you," she whispered before disappearing entirely. When the ritual ended, the forest fell silent. The oppressive feeling that had lingered for months lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. The group left the forest, their bond stronger but their spirits weary. For the first time in months, they felt free. The symbols, the whispers, and the nightmares were gone. The road had finally released them, or so they thought. Months later, as Clara walked through her apartment, she noticed something on her dining table, the photograph of Eleanor. This time the image was different. Eleanor was smiling, but her eyes seemed to follow Clara wherever she moved, and in the background of the photograph there was a shadow, a figure that looked eerily familiar. The curse wasn't gone, it had just evolved. The photograph haunted Clara for days. No matter where she hid it, the image would reappear, on her nightstand, her car dashboard, even her office desk. The figure in the background of the picture, which looked like a shadow at first, became more distinct. It was a man, tall and imposing, with hollow eyes and a faint smirk. The others hadn't experienced anything unusual since their last encounter, and Clara began to feel isolated in her fear. When she finally reached out to the group, what she learned shook her to her core. Lisa admitted she had seen the shadow figure too. It appeared in reflections, mirrors, windows, even puddles. "It's like it's watching me," she confessed during a video call with the group. Sam revealed he had been hearing footsteps in his apartment at odd hours, even though he lived alone. Max's TV turned on by itself, always playing static with faint whispers he couldn't understand. Ethan, who had initially been the biggest skeptic, confessed that he often woke up feeling like someone was standing at the foot of his bed. The group realized this wasn't over. Whatever they had released wasn't Eleanor. It was something darker, something tied to the road, but even more dangerous. Desperate for answers, the group visited Mr. Radcliffe again. When they told him about the shadow figure, his face turned pale. "You didn't just release Eleanor," he said, his voice trembling. "You released what was feeding off her suffering, something ancient and malevolent, an entity that thrives on fear and despair. It's not bound to the road anymore, it's bound to you." Radcliffe explained that the entity, known in folklore as Umbra, was a parasitic force that latched onto the emotions of its victims. It had been using the curse of the road to trap souls for centuries. "Is there any way to stop it?" Sam asked. Radcliffe hesitated. "There's one way," he said reluctantly, "but it's dangerous. You must lure it back to its source and trap it permanently. It will require a sacrifice." The group devised a plan. They would return to the forest and use themselves as bait to lure Umbra back to the altar. Once there, they would trap it using a modified ritual that Radcliffe provided. The catch? One of them would have to stay behind to seal the ritual, ensuring the others could escape. The weight of the decision hung heavily over the group. No one wanted to volunteer, but they all knew the stakes. On a cold, moonless night, the five friends set out once more. The road seemed more menacing than ever, as though it were alive, pulsating with the energy of the entity. When they reached the altar, the forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing longer and darker. Umbra appeared, its form towering and grotesque, its hollow eyes glowing with malice. The entity whispered to each of them, its voice slithering into their minds. It preyed on their deepest fears and regrets, trying to break their resolve. "You cannot defeat me," it hissed. "You are mine." But the group stood their ground, lighting the candles and beginning the incantation. As the ritual neared completion, the forest erupted into chaos. The ground shook, trees bent and cracked, and Umbra howled in rage. Radcliffe's instructions were clear. Someone had to stay within the circle of salt to keep the entity contained while the others escaped. "I'll do it," Ethan said, stepping into the circle. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "It has to end here." The others protested, but Ethan shook his head. "This thing has ruined our lives. I won't let it take anyone else." As the final words of the incantation were spoken, the circle began to glow, trapping Umbra within it. Ethan turned to his friends one last time. "Go. Now." Tears streaming down their faces, the others fled the forest, leaving Ethan behind. When they reached the edge of the forest, the chaos subsided. The oppressive feeling was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. The group waited, hoping Ethan would emerge, but he never did. Days later, they returned with authorities to search the forest, but there was no trace of Ethan or the altar. It was as if they had never been there. Life slowly returned to normal for the remaining 4 friends. The shadows were gone, and the nightmares ceased, but each of them carried the weight of what they had lost. One night, Clara found a note tucked under her pillow. It was in Ethan's handwriting. "It's over, but remember, the road always watches." And in the distance, just beyond the edge of her vision, she swore she saw a faint, familiar shadow. The end.